Take a moment and allow yourself to turn inward. Allow that power of intention and attention to shift from the world outside to the world inside. Allow the awareness to unhook itself from all of the sounds, the sensations, the smells in the external world. And also allow it to unhook itself from the fluctuations within the mind. Just very consciously and very deliberately unhook that awareness and draw it deep within yourself. And notice what the inner world is like. Allow that awareness to be drawn to the breath and see how subtly you can be aware of the breath as it flows into you and flows out. Most of us notice the breath just in our chest or our lungs. But can you even feel it in that little space between your upper lip and the bottom of your nose? Can you feel the breath there? Let the awareness become so subtle that it's fully merged with the breath, even from the time that it's just blowing just across the lip and right into the nose. And can you follow that breath as it flows into you? Can you feel it flowing into and filling all of the cells of your being? Can you feel that sacred prana, that life force that we take in? That sacred energy that is flowing to you from across the tops of the Himalayas, from across the waters of Mother Ganga, charged with the energy of this sacred land. Can you feel that prana coming in? And touching and awakening all of the cells of your being, the cells of the physical body, but also the cells of the energetic body, the vital body, what we call the pranamaya kosha, this body that is made of vital energy, of prana. Can you feel the energy flowing into it? And remember, we're not judging, we're not telling stories, we're not analyzing. We're just being fully aware. Slowly and gently, bring the palms of your hands together in chest level in Namaste. And gently rub the palms of your hands against each other. And press the palms of those hands into your closed eyes. Slowly lower the hands and open the eyes. Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. Oh, we got lots of slips tonight. So usually we start with a question that came in from online. But tonight I have so many slips of paper. We'll start with these, or at least with one of them, and then we'll open it up to any other questions that anyone here might have. How can I control my ego? It makes me feel that I am something. I know better, but I am it makes me feel that I am something, that I know better, that I am a more sincere seeker than others, that I am more intelligent. But it is a burden on me. It weighs me down. It brings separation. I cannot gel with people quickly as I keep judging them. Please guide. So, this is a really common and very natural problem. It's a very good question. I'm very glad that whoever brought it has brought it. It's really common. And sadly, it's even common once we start on a spiritual path. Before we get on a spiritual path, the ego says, oh, you're the most powerful, you're the most beautiful, you're the richest, you're the best, you're the smartest. We get on a spiritual path and the ego says, you're the most humble, you're the most surrendered, you're the deepest. Right? And you see the interesting irony of the game that it plays. I'm the most humble, really. But that's the subtle game of the ego. And the only way to free yourself of it, first of all, is to see it and acknowledge it. Because when I think that is me, then it's very hard to get free of it. So we look at it, we notice it, we understand it's a natural aspect of the psyche, and we simply don't allow ourselves to believe it. There were games we used to play when we were kids where it would say, okay, if so-and-so always lies, if this part always lies and they're telling you this, how do you know, is it true, is it not true? And they're kind of mind games. If person X always tells the truth and says this, if person Y always lies but says that, how do you know? Well, with the ego, you can pretty much assume it's always lying. It's always telling you a story. So you hear it, you acknowledge it, you notice it. But you treat it very much like you would a child, even a family member, a neighbor, a colleague who's they're not evil. The ego isn't bad. It's not your enemy. You know, we paint the ego as this just horrible thing, as though we've somehow been possessed by some demon that came from outside, or, invasion of the body snatcher sort of situation where it's come from outside into us and grabbed us. It's not that. The ego's actually been developed as we grow, trying to give us an understanding of who we are. The ego is just the sum total of all of that we've learned, that we've heard, that we've internalized, typically from parents, from family of origin when we were young, in our educational system, in our cultural system, values, ethics, priorities, etc., identifications. It isn't bad. It's not out to get you. It's just wrong. And the only big problem with the ego is it's attached to its way of belief. So it doesn't like to let go. It doesn't like to acknowledge that it's wrong because it needs to hold on to that in order to stay alive. The very existence of the ego is dependent upon you believing it, you going along with it. If I don't believe it, it essentially dissolves into nothingness. Then it's just a random voice in my head that no one's paying attention to. And that's actually the way to become free. So don't try to fight it. Sometimes people talk about annihilating the ego, going to battle with the ego. And I always say, the problem with that is that when you make this decision that I'm going to annihilate my ego, well, guess who's in your head listening to that? Guess who hears you say, today's the day I'm going to annihilate my ego? The ego. And then the ego gets very good at kind of pretending to be what you want it to be. So if you say, today's the day I'm going to listen to my inner voice and annihilate the ego, well, the ego puts on its inner voice hat. So don't think about it like a battle that you're trying to annihilate it. Think about it as just an aspect of the way that your brain and your mind sort of formulated with your psyche and your experiences as you grew, that at some time may have been helpful. It's no longer helpful. Now it's harmful to you. And you just don't want to listen to it. So essentially you ignore it and just keep going. Think about if you're walking down the road, feeling really quite good, you've had a good day, you're positive, you're anchored in gratitude and love, and some drunk, random, kind of crazy person on the side of the road is yelling at you, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, Now, it's not going to ruin our day, because we understand it's not true, it's not about me. It's about this guy who happens to be drunk or on drugs or crazy and is kind of yelling at everybody who goes by. I understand I'm not what that person is telling me I am. And I just keep walking. It doesn't impact me. It doesn't affect me. I don't believe it. I don't need to get in therapy because this guy told me this on the street as he yelled at me. I just see it for what it is. An untruth. And I keep going. And that's really, I have found, the best way to work with the ego is just gently, lovingly, maybe in the same way that you would pray for the man because you realize that, hey, he's in trouble. Drunk, on drugs, crazy, shouting at people. But you're not going to say, oh, really, I'm awful because this, crazy drunk guy on the road said I was awful. And the same thing is true with the ego. Just because it says it doesn't mean we believe it. If the ego is saying it, you can be sure that at some point in your life you internalized that. And again, it may have been from a parent, it may have been a sibling, it may have been a teacher, it may have been a TV commercial you saw, something in the culture. But at some point you internalized something that just isn't true. And so we just acknowledge it, see it, bow to it, pray for it, and move on. We don't give it the ability to dictate what we think, what we say, how we live. And so for this questioner who finds that ego, they're constantly feeling better than others and judging them. Well, from a psychological perspective, that's a defense mechanism. That's actually rooted in an internal feeling of lack. And so if you notice that you're always telling yourself, oh God, I'm the smartest. This person's stupid. This person's an idiot. I'm the only one who knows anything. And you're always judging others. It's a really good sign that actually inside you don't feel so good about yourself. And the best thing to do is actually recognize, really work on recognizing your fullness, your wholeness. It's counterintuitive because if the ego is already saying you're the best, it's counterintuitive to actually work on recognizing that beauty of you, that greatness of you, but that actually is the remedy. I judge others only when I need to do that in order to protect myself from feeling like I'm less good than they are. So instead, when you are with people, give yourself a task of thinking only positive things about them. What can you think about? When you first meet them, it may be something physical, a nice smile, nice eyes, even something superficial. Maybe they're not smiling, maybe their eyes are closed. Maybe say, okay, they've got nice shoes. Whatever it is, but just something positive. And then as you get to know them, start finding more and more and more positive things you can about them. And just make that your task. And you'll find that being with people, A, is much more pleasant because the mind now isn't full of judgment and negativity. It's full of positivity. But it also allows you to develop a closeness with people that this questioner was yearning for. Because when you're appreciating someone, it draws you closer. They feel it even if you don't verbalize it. They then open up. And you're drawn closer together. So these are they're practices, they're tools, they're techniques to work with the habituated way that our own mind tends to work. And they have very, very powerful results. Any questions here? If anyone here has a question, just raise your hand. That's all right, just be loud, they'll fix it.
Namaskaram, Sadhviji. My question question is how to control anger.
How to control anger. So, the answer is not what a lot of us do. A lot of us who are trying to work with anger, anger arises and we suppress it. We notice anger is there and I'm not angry, I'm not angry, I'm not angry, I'm not angry. And all it does is it becomes like a volcano inside of us. And then something happens, some tiny little thing, and we erupt. Not actually over that little thing, and that's why people get so hurt. My God, choti si cheez kya hua? But it's actually not that little thing. It's that we've been repressing and repressing and repressing. So you don't want to repress it. You don't want to suppress it. But you also don't want to allow it to be an energy that dictates what you do, what you say, because then we regret it. Then we find ourselves saying, oh, that wasn't me. Well, who was it? Of course it was you. It was just you impacted by anger. So instead, the way that we work with anger, first of all, is through a practice of this mindful awareness, like what we began with. Because then what you notice is you start to be able to notice anger coming long before it grips you. Most of us know we are angry when we are literally about to hit somebody. That's when we realize, oh my God, I'm angry. Because I'm literally about to punch a hole through a wall or in someone's face. But when you become really practiced in mindfulness and awareness, you start to notice it from the very moment that it starts to get triggered. Just a very, very subtle little something. And then you're able to look at it and understand, that's really interesting. Look at how I got so triggered. And then instead of anger being in charge, you're in charge. You're looking at the anger, you're noticing it, you're interested in it. You're curious about it. I was so peaceful. I was so happy. I was so grounded. That person said this thing or did this thing. Look at how it's impacting me. Isn't that interesting? Because when we're not meditative or contemplative or introspective, we say, well, you made me angry. But we all know that's not true. Nobody can make us angry. People are just doing their thing. If you find that you are triggered into anger, it's very interesting to notice, what is it? Why is it this made me angry but that didn't? Or why is it this made me angry but it didn't make that other person angry? What is it that's triggering in me? And then you notice it as it's coming. And then you're able to change it. Then you're able, through practices of anything ranging from breathing, drinking a glass of water, filling yourself with love, taking a walk, chanting. There's a million practices you can do that diffuse the anger when it's just starting to come, that are not suppressing it. What it's doing is it's taking that energy and redirecting it. But recognize that the reason you're angry is because something that you wanted to happen is not happening. Some way that you thought things should be is not how they're being. Whether it's how someone else is acting or speaking, whether it's how the universe is behaving. That we have an agenda, an attachment, a vision to how things should be. They don't happen like that, we get angry. So of course the best preventative measure to anger is to say, what is it I'm so attached to? And is it worth getting angry? If I've got an attachment that you are going to treat me a certain way, and every time you don't, I get angry, well, maybe the answer to my anger, rather than trying to change you or yell at you or hate you or whatever I'm going to do, instead of that, destroys my peace, ruins our relationship, doesn't actually make you change. Instead of that, can I let go of the attachment? Can I just recognize that you are here in your karmic journey, acting and behaving and speaking according to your karmic journey? You're doing the best you can, like everyone's doing the best they can. And to unhook my own peace from your behavior. That's the key to whether it's freedom from anger, freedom from frustration, freedom from all of these, what we would term negative emotions. They're because somehow my joy, my peace is hooked into how other people are behaving or how the universe is behaving. So just unhook it. It's easier said than done, of course, but it's something that with great practice, you get better and better and better at. And the good thing is it's not all or nothing. Maybe you get angry 5 times today and tomorrow you get angry 4 times. Then you get angry 3 times. Or maybe you get angry 5 times, but you're able to get free of that anger very, very quickly. We've always got a choice. You know, one of my favorite realizations is there's always an alternative to however we're thinking. We always think that the way we're thinking is the right way of thinking. Well, I have to think like this. I mean, that person is awful. Or I have to think like this. I mean, this thing should make me angry. But whenever you find yourself distressed inside, anger, frustration, jealousy, grief, whatever you're going through, repentance, shame, guilt, I mean, all of these emotions that steal our joy and our peace, just ask yourself a very simple question. Is there an alternative way of feeling? I'm not saying that what that person did was okay or wasn't awful. Maybe it was awful. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to give up your peace and joy just because what someone else did was awful. Even if we agree it's objectively, unquestionably awful, well, is it still possible for you to be in peace even if someone else does something that's awful? Of course. Right? So always ask yourself, is there an alternative? And what I have found is there always is. And then the question becomes now, can I just embody that alternative? Can I choose love and choose peace regardless? Yes. Yes. Mike Dana Bianca.
How do I overcome my fears?
How do you overcome your fears?
Yes.
So, here's what's interesting about fear. And I'm not going to make you say in front of everybody what you're afraid of. Okay, great. Mike, great. What are you afraid of?
The smallest things to the biggest thing. Like today I jumped into the Ganga and I just froze because I was like, oh my God, what if something bites me? Or like there's a snake,
Okay.
and, you know. Or then like to the biggest thing where I'm, you know, I feel that people are judging me, or, you know, I feel confused sometimes as to how to handle a situation, so I get scared.
Okay, great. And I love the 2 examples she gave. She said from the biggest things to the smallest things. She said, like today, for example, I jumped in Ganga. And suddenly I was afraid, oh my God, what if something bites me? What if something happens? Or she said, I feel afraid that people will judge me. Now here's the interesting thing about fear. The fundamental thing we are afraid of, the core of every fear, is fear of death. So if you look at your example of jumped in Ganga, I was afraid something was going to bite me or hurt me. Well, take that to its worst case scenario. Take any fear you have to its worst case scenario. Let's say something does bite you. Okay, so then what happens? Well, either you die immediately, or you don't die immediately, but you get some kind of infection maybe, right? Then you die later. You get a limb amputated. Eventually you die from it. But the end of the day, the fear is not, oh, I'm going to be bitten, but it won't hurt. Or I'll be bitten, but it'll be very small, and Mom will put a Band-Aid on it, and it'll be fine. If it's a fear that's paralyzing us, take it to its worst case scenario, and what you'll find is it always ends with, and then I die. Now here's what's interesting. The other example you gave about people judging you. Because you know what the number one fear of people is? I find this so interesting. Yes, exactly. Public speaking. Number one fear of people polled. It's not guns. It's not cars. I mean, if you think about the number of people who die every year from cars and from guns, from mosquitoes. I don't know anybody who's got a mosquito phobia or a car phobia. Public speaking. Because we feel we will be judged, we will be humiliated, and listen to the semantics around it, we say, I will die of embarrassment. Right? I will be so humiliated, I will die. Now, nobody actually ever died of embarrassment, but it's an ego death. And so the fundamental fear that we have is death of the body or of the ego. And you literally can divide all of our fears into those two categories. Now, the way to get free of them, first of all, to realize you are going to die. It's the only non-negotiable on earth. And the sooner that we really come to terms with that, the sooner we can get free of the fears we have. Because you are going to die. And it may be an illness, it may be an accident, it may be old age, it may be an animal bite. I can't tell you, I'm not clairvoyant. But I know enough to know you are going to die. Because we're all going to die. And I know enough to know that there's no way of knowing when or how it's going to happen. Which means that having fear of something that's going to end in death is actually having a fear of the one thing that is going to happen. No matter how afraid I am of it. Fear of death never granted anybody old age or immortality. And so this is where our spiritual practices get us anchored in the truth of our mortality, of the body's mortality, but it gets us anchored in the part of us that doesn't die. Right? When we pray, asatoma sadgamaya, tamsoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. So that last line says, oh God, lead us from death to immortality. Now, God made us. God created nature. We've got bodies that are pre-programmed to disintegrate and die. So it doesn't make any sense that a prayer would be saying to God, oh God, make me the exception to your rule. Oh God, make me the one body that never disintegrates, that never dies. That's not what we're praying. The Vedas aren't giving us prayers of ridiculous supplication to God for things that would never happen. The teaching is, oh God, lead me from that darkness of ignorance in which I think I am this body, in which I think I am this separate being. Lead me into the light of wisdom in which I know that I am the soul, I am the spirit, I am that which is immortal, because I'm not the body. And so the best way of overcoming those fears is actually finding within you a connection to soul, spirit, consciousness, oneness, love, because that will never die. No matter how many times it gets bit or washed away or in accidents or illnesses, nothing can harm it. So get connected to that. And then dealing with the ego death situation, that's really something that we all have to just sort of white knuckle your way through, because the fear of being judged actually ends up stealing our lives. We end up not taking risks, not doing things, not speaking our truth, not living our truth, because we're afraid that people are going to judge us and think badly about us and make fun of us, or that we're going to fail. And that's where we really just have to say, you know what? Living my truth, speaking my truth, fulfilling my dharma, being the fullest, most beautiful expression of who I am is so much more important than getting everybody to like me. Because the problem with spending your whole life getting everybody to like you is you end up not liking yourself very much. Because you've given up your truths, your heart, your beauty, your gifts. Because society says this, culture says that, or somebody told you this. So you have to that's really one that we have to just work on the courage. Take little itsy bitsy steps. And then get bigger and bigger and bigger. And slowly you're going to find, even on the days where you get up to give a speech and maybe you forget all your lines or you forget the whole thing. Even if people laugh, maybe they even throw tomatoes at you. All right, end of the day, you're still there. People who matter still love you. Of course. Of course. Yes.
Guruji Pranam. How can we feel God? Because as a lawyer, I'm always in search of evidences.
Beautiful. How do we feel God with evidence? Are you married?
Yes, he's my son.
He's your son. Wonderful. Do you love your son?
Yes.
Prove it to me.
Because I have given birth to him.
That doesn't mean you love him. Plenty of people kill their babies.
Because I'm emotionally attached to him.
Prove it. Mike Denon ko taki baki look. Baya. Hello, Mike Denon ko. Prove it.
Because I've given birth to him. I'm emotionally attached with him.
I don't believe you. Give me the evidence.
This is my inner feeling. This is my inner feeling.
It's your inner feeling?
Yes.
Great. Okay. It's exactly what I was looking for. It's an inner feeling.
Yes.
Can you prove it?
I can describe it me and I don't have...
Prove it. Prove it.
There's no proof. Because
Okay.
I believe in myself because he's my son. I'm emotionally attached. That's it.
Great. So, people who believe in God, it's exactly the same thing.
Yes, maybe.
Anybody who has experienced the presence of God will tell you, I know it. I feel it in my heart.
Yes.
It's with me all the time, like your love of your son is with you all the time.
Yes.
You may not be able to prove it to me, but that doesn't mean it's not true. You know it's true. But you wouldn't win that in a court of law if you needed evidence. Because you have no evidence. The simple fact that he's alive and healthy does not prove that you loved him. I mean, I could be the devil's advocate. I could say, well, you just fed and clothed him because you didn't want to be thrown in jail for child abuse.
Maybe.
Right? I mean, from a purely evidence-based perspective, the two most important things in the world, God and love, cannot be proven. But anybody who's experienced either of them knows it is true. And this is where the dilemma comes in trying to use tools of truth that don't pertain. I mean, when you said, give me evidence, I'm a lawyer. Well, I'm the daughter of a lawyer. I know what evidence means. It means something that you can see. I can say, Your Honor, this is exhibit number 5, right? You can see it, or you can hear it, or you can touch it. You can smell it, you can taste it, it's got a size, a shape. It's something tangible. I mean, this is what counts as evidence. Can't prove love, and you can't prove God. But that doesn't mean they don't exist, and it doesn't mean that they aren't the most important things in our life. So my suggestion to you as a lawyer is very similar to my suggestion to scientists. Is in your realm of science, in your realm of law, use the methodology that has been agreed upon. The Bar Association has agreed that this is what counts as evidence. In science, we have decided that this is what counts as tools of knowing. And that's great. For law, for science. But just don't try to stick every single thing under the jurisdiction of law or science, because not everything fits. Yes. Last. Actually, we'll take you two. Okay, we'll do her and then you last. Yes, no problem. No problem.
How do we deal with the vacuum in middle age?
How do we deal with the vacuum of middle age? So physics tells us the universe hates a vacuum. And it's a principle of physics about how when there is low pressure, things flow into it. That the more space you create, the more will flow into it. The same thing is true spiritually. The more space you create, the more that flows into it. So in this time of middle age where your children are grown and no longer need you, where maybe the career that you had to give so much time and attention to, you don't now, this is a vacuum. Allow into that vacuum beauty to flow. Allow a deep spiritual practice to flow. Allow a whole new way of thinking about yourself. You've identified as mother, as wife, as this particular job, this role. But you're more than that. Discover who you are. Get engaged. Do seva, do volunteer work. Give of yourself. And in giving of yourself, you're going to discover more and more of yourself. For most of us, the first part of life is it's beautiful and it's very narrow because we can only operate as parents, spouses. We've got to earn money. We have to put food on the table, have to send the kids to school, have to build a house, buy a house, rent a house, whatever it is. Now you've got the freedom to discover a self, gifts that are so much more than that. Begin with service. The world needs you. Choose something that touches you, that pulls your heart, that inspires you. And give of yourself. Start something musical also. Start something artistic also. Find ways of expression of yourself. And slowly, 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 you'll find how much more of you there is and how much more of life there is than you thought. But if you keep identifying as the mother whose kids no longer need her, then it stays even more of a vacuum. And it's also a time in which our identification with our bodies in many ways, a lot of us have this identification with the body. It's beautiful, it's sexy, it's strong, it's this, it's that. And slowly, slowly we discover, not quite as physically beautiful as it once was. Not quite as strong as it once was. And it's such an interesting time to reevaluate also that whole sense of identity. And to re-remember and re-recognize that we aren't the body. It's going to keep changing. But we aren't it. So allow grace to flow into that vacuum and fill it. Beautiful. And last question.
So my question is, so there are many times in our life we have to face the situation that we don't know what to do in our life. So you have to make a decision, and then you ask your friend and like, hey, what should I do, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you are the person who made a decision. And then so you have to follow your tuition. So my question is, how do you know that this is the right tuition or the good decision that you have to follow? And also, like, you are in Rishikesh, you get so many to do, like to learn and to. How do you know this is the right knowledge for you? Thank you so much.
Yeah, decision making. So here's where I would start. Whenever we have to make a decision, the first place to really start is to listen within. What is your intuition telling you? What is your gut telling you? And it takes a little while to separate the voice of fear, the voice of desire, the voice of culture, the voice of indoctrination. But slowly, slowly, meditatively, we start to be able to tease apart those voices until we can actually hear that inner voice. Do you take advice from others? Sure, only if they are people whose life choices you agree with. I mean, a lot of us tend to take advice from people just because they're there. And you think, well, if I wouldn't want to trade places with that person, if I wouldn't want my life to end up like that person's, why would I take their advice on what to do? Right? It's like taking, investment advice from someone who doesn't have any money. Right? I mean, you'd think, well, if they knew what to do with my investments, clearly they would do it with their own and they wouldn't be in such bad financial shape. In the same way that you would want to take investment advice from someone who was wealthy and doing well, In the same way, you want to take life advice from someone who you look at and you say, oh yeah, that person is, I'd like to have something that person has or be somewhere that person is. The most important piece, though, is teasing apart those voices of fear and desire and indoctrination and acculturalization and all of those things to really hear the inner voice. But you know, there's a lot of times in life where there isn't one right decision. You know, you say you're here in Rishikesh and there's so much to learn, and how do you know what's right? Well, in a way, all of it is beautiful. Unfortunately, we've only got 24 hours in a day, and we have to sleep and bathe and eat and whatnot. And you don't want to be frenetic and frantic and, you know, oh, got to leave the meditation because I've got a yoga class. You know, you want to be able to really be in things. And so this is that, you know, the challenge of being in a place of abundance. It's the challenge of blessings. You're overly blessed. And to recognize that a lot of times in our life, our decisions that we have to make are really just that. They're win-win options. There isn't a bad choice. So the first thing to do is to be really grateful that we are in that place where the challenge is a challenge of abundance. Where to go for vacation? I mean, it's a dilemma of abundance. I mean, A, that you've got time off. B, that you've got money to actually think about going somewhere. Like, you're incredibly blessed. Be grateful for it. And then just allow your intuition to kind of guide you. And absorb whatever you can from wherever you are. And the last piece is, you know, stay open, though, to that intuition. Because sometimes we make a decision and then we realize, that decision was just to get me to this point so that I would see this other door open. So maybe we take a job, for example, such that through that job, we meet a client or another person who comes in, and actually that's a door that opens for us. So don't necessarily think that every decision that you make has to be for the rest of your life. Some decisions are there just to open other doorways. Some decisions are there forever, and we just get deeper and deeper and more full from them. And then some are just, oh, I'm going to, go here today, and that was just so that you would have that lesson or meet that person or have that experience or learn that. Okay? Yeah, just develop. And it's a good practice time to learn to use your intuition, because since there is no wrong answer, it's a good way to just learn to listen to it and trust it. And you may find yourself somewhere you think, I ended up somehow not in the right place. Get up and walk out. Yeah, trust yourself. Beautiful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evenings. And a beautiful morning and day to our family joining us online from around the world. And so much love to you all. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.